Welcome to REST, which stands for Resiliency and Empowerment Seminar today. I'm your host, Susan Gans, founder and business strategist with Gans Strategic Solutions. I created this web show to shine a light on owners of small and mid-sized businesses, nonprofit executives, and other community leaders to highlight their professional journeys, to highlight their respective organizations, and to be inspired by their stories of resilience and being empowered. Today, I'm so excited to speak to Todd Cherches. Todd is the CEO and co-founder of BigBlueGumball, a New York City-based consulting firm specializing in leadership development, public speaking, and executive coaching. He is also a three-time award-winning adjunct professor of leadership in the Human Capital Management Master's Program at the NYU School of Professional Studies and Division of Programs in Business. And if that wasn't enough, he's also a lecturer on leadership in various graduate programs at Columbia University. Todd is also a TEDx presenter in The Power of Visual Thinking and the author of his first book, so excited because it just came out, Visual Leadership, Leveraging the Power of Visual Thinking in Leadership and in Life. With that, we welcome Todd to the show.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you.
You are quite welcome. So we were talking a little bit before the show about sort of the early days in your career path that you describe as a roller coaster ride. So take us back to the early days of you being in media and take us through how you came to focus on leadership.
Sure. I actually talk about it briefly in my TEDx talk that I did last year, where I said my dream as a kid growing up, I wanted to be Superman. But if I couldn't be Superman, then my backup plan was to be Batman. But if I couldn't be either Superman or Batman, and it's good to have a fallback position in your career because you don't always get to live your dream, it was to work in TV in some capacity. I was a TV addict and I was a bookworm, extreme bookworm, introvert. We'll talk more about that later. You could tell just by all the books behind me that I cannot throw out a book. So basically, I wanted to work in TV. I didn't know in what capacity. When you're a kid, you don't know. You watch Bewitched and you see Darren Stevens doing like TV advertising stuff. So you don't really know, but I knew I loved TV and I wanted to be in and around it, but I was really extremely shy. So I knew it wasn't in front of the camera. I knew it would be something behind the camera, whether it was writing or producing or being a network TV executive or something like that. So that was my dream and that's what I hope to do. So I got my bachelor's degree in English literature. A lot of people think based on what I do today that I majored in business, but I was an English literature major. And my claim to fame in high school was that I had read the complete works of Shakespeare by the time I was 18. So wow. all 37 plays, 154 sonnets, and 4 poems that Shakespeare wrote. So I just started with Romeo and Juliet, and I had a lot of OCD type of things. So I just started with one, and I just kept going. I couldn't stop until I was
wow. So that's impressive.
So you can tell I had very little social life. So between reading and TV and my dog, it was like I did play some basketball and things like that. But I graduated from SUNY Albany, State University of New York at Albany, with a bachelor's degree in English literature, and I continued on to get my master's in communication. And again, my dream was to work in television. But at that time, they did very little TV production in New York. So if you wanted to work in TV, you had to move to LA. But I was not ready to do that yet. I was very, again, a homebody and everything. So I took a job. I was able to get a job at Ogilvy and Mather Advertising in New York, where I bought network TV time. So I was in TV, but when you're in the ad business on that side of things, as a media buyer, it's all about numbers, it's ratings, it's shares, it's dollars, right? That's not creative. Yes. You're not dealing with the commercials. So I did that for a year and I was miserable and bored. And I always ask my students to guess what my starting salary was. Can you guess what my starting salary was at Ogilvy and Mather as an assistant media buyer in 1985?
I would guess 20,000.
12.
Okay.
So try living in Manhattan on $12,000 a year, even in 1985. That didn't happen. So I was living with my parents and commuting from Long Island, from Comac, Long Island. So that's a 2-hour commute. So again, you're 22 years old. You don't want to be sitting on a train with your father for 2 hours going back and forth to the city. So, and making no money. And then all your friends would go out after work and you were stuck I have to catch the train to get home because you had to turn around and do it the next morning. So
Yes.
after a year of doing that, I packed my bags. I actually went to visit the college roommate in LA. I saw the Hollywood sign. I saw the studios. And I said, this is where I belong. So I actually came back. I shocked my parents by saying I'm moving out to LA. And they were like, yeah, sure, yeah, sure. I gave my 2 weeks notice, packed my bag,
Wow.
and I left. So I'll stop there. I'll let you take it. So that's the first part of my career.
So that's very interesting. And how did you go from, because you also shared before we started recording that you're very shy and you didn't public speak. So now all of a sudden you're picking up and going to LA.
Yeah.
So how did you overcome, if you will, or break out of your shell a bit to be so bold as to go from far away from home to the other coast?
Yeah, it was really the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. Not only leaving my parents, but my dog. My dog was like my closest person or thing in the world to me. So that was the hardest thing, leaving my dog behind, a little cockapoo. She ended up living till she was 17. So she had a nice long life, and I always look forward to visiting her when I came home. But you know what? I was so miserable in my job and my life, and I had no dating life. I had no social life. I was so miserable that as hard as it was to change, because I'm not spontaneous. Usually I need 2 weeks to plan any spontaneity. And I'm not the type to change, but I think it was just an escape. I think I was just so miserable that I needed, and then, going out there, I had a taste of it. If I hadn't gone out there to visit my friend, I never would have done it. But just knowing that we would get an apartment together, he was my college roommate, there was some familiarity. So that enabled me to do it. But when I got out there, again, I had no connections in the entertainment industry. I had no experience in that business other than a year that we had made there. So I actually took a job during the day doing telephone sales for the LA Times in a call center. And at night, I worked as a bouncer in a club. So that's a whole lot. We could talk about that for an hour.
Wow.
Talk about I would go to this club and never talk to anyone because I was so painfully shy and such a wallflower. But you give someone a suit, a clipboard, and a velvet rope, and the power that goes along with it, and I became a changed man. All of a sudden, I was Todd the bouncer, and doorman. So I did that for actually a few years. So it was actually a good way to supplement my income while I was floundering between temp jobs, internships, part-time gigs. So and then one day I was throwing this drunk guy out, and he punched me in the face, and I went down, and he broke my glasses, and that's when my bouncing career ended. So.
But I guess the bouncing career gave you this confidence because you could take on this persona, right? And then you owned the persona, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Is when I was working, fast forward, I got a job at Disney, and I wrote a TV pilot called Dr. Bouncer, PhD. And it was about a guy who was a college professor during the day, but moonlighted as a bouncer in a club. And he'd lived this double life. So little did I know that 20 years later, I would actually become a college professor. At the time, it was just I never actually envisioned it because I would never be the type of person to get up in front of the room or teach. So it's just funny how that almost kind of came true in a way.
Yes. Yeah. So tell us more about the media career and then how did you get back on the East Coast?
Sure. So I ended up spending I figured I'd go out to LA for a year or two. That turned into 10 years. So first I got a friend of mine got me, first I got a job working in the mailroom for the company of Michael Nesmith from the Monkees. So baby boomers know who the Monkees are. My students have no idea who the Monkees are. So that was amazing. He had a video production company. So I started out in the mailroom, and I got a job in marketing, and then I got laid off along with a few other people. Then I took an internship at Aaron Spelling, which was amazing. And my job was just to put scripts together for Dynasty, like putting the pink pages and the blue pages. But again, I was on a studio lot, and it was exciting being around Joan Collins and all these people, right? So that was my first real brush with Hollywood and celebrity. And I did that for a while. And then I got a job at Columbia Pictures Television because my friend Mark was working there. He got me in. And you have to have connections. There's no other way to get in that business without connections. So I did contract administration for Columbia Pictures casting. I got laid off from there, and then I temped at Disney. My friend Seth was working for Disney, so I got in the temp pool there, and I temped in 8 different departments in 8 weeks. So I was in legal 1 week, finance, marketing, whatever. And then when the strike ended, kind of like musical chairs, I found myself in the TV comedy department, and I was hired by a writer-producer. So right there, I was like, magically ended up at Disney in comedy development, which was my first job that I really loved. And I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Wow. I'm gonna interject there because I was just curious. Is the world of entertainment to me is just so fascinating because it's something I don't have an insight into. And is there anything that surprised you about some of the celebrities that you came in contact with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, my favorite celebrity is I was walking across the Disney lot to the commissary and I heard someone say, excuse me, which way is the cafeteria? And it was Tom Hanks. He was shooting Turner and Hooch. And he was known,
Oh,
but he wasn't a huge star at the time. He had done Bosom Buddies and Splash. Um,
yes.
so basically I said, oh, that's where I'm going. Come with me. So I walked across the whole studio lot for like 10 minutes with Tom Hanks. And friends of mine were like, called me when I got back to my office. What were you doing talking to Tom Hanks? So we got to the commissary, we got our food together, and we were just about to have lunch together. And the people from the production said, Tom, we're over here. And he's like, I'm so sorry, Ty. I got to go sit with the team. Is that okay? He said, is that okay? So Tom Hanks is asking me if that's okay. I'm like, so that was my almost lunch with Tom Hanks. So that was my favorite, one of my favorite celebrity experiences. So, but the thing is, the other side is the disappointing side. A lot of people are not nice. I'll talk about that in a second. I had a lot of really horrible bosses, abusive bosses. Yeah, the Harvey Weinstein syndrome that's the extreme case, but there's a lot of mini Harvey Weinsteins out there, sadistic, abusive, and it's the nature of that business. You think it's about creativity and fun, but a lot of it is about power, control, and money, and abusive power. And women are not treated well in that industry. There's a lot of issues with things that people got away with that you wouldn't get away with today, hopefully. But it was, I'll tell you some more of my horror stories in a minute. But that was my biggest. So the best thing was being around. I got to sit on Seinfeld's couch when I went to a taping of Seinfeld. I got to sit on Norm's bar stool on the Cheers set. So just getting that behind the scenes stuff, that's the fun
Yes,
stuff. The disappointing
absolutely.
side is that it's, the dark side of Hollywood. We'll call it that for right now.
So I want to pick up on something that struck me when you were sharing about the Tom Hanks story. That's just such a mini lesson in leadership right there, right? He was just, look, I'm a person who's looking to get lunch. Oh, you're another
Yeah.
person on the lot. And I don't care what level you are. I just
Mm-hmm.
have a question, and it's like he saw you for the person that you're, just
Yeah.
a person. And for him to then say, oh, they would like me to sit over there because they probably have production things, and
Yeah.
and asking you, oh, I'm really sorry,
Yeah.
that to me shows humility. Those are essence of a
Yeah.
leadership. And contrast that with some of the other anecdotes you just sort
Yeah.
of threw out there. And you shared with me that sort of your experiences here in the media really shaped your journey into leadership.
Yeah.
So tell me how that transition was made, and is that Tom Hanks story that's just so in the present right now for
Yeah.
you? Was that one of the, oh, I'm going to file this away as a best practice, and that's contrasted with the horrible bosses. So
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, he's such a great example because that's who he is. He's still that way. This is what, 30 years later, and he's still that same person, that
Yes.
nice, gentle, empathetic, caring person. Celebrity and money changes people. Seinfeld, I met Seinfeld earlier in his career when he was just a stand-up comedian. He still wasn't that friendly, but he was fun. And I think he's kind of changed over the years in a way. If you watch Comedian Cards Getting Coffee, I think it just changes you if you don't keep it from changing you. And that's the same with, I saw people who, it's almost like my position as a bank bouncer, that was almost a microcosm. I was like this nerdy guy, and you gave me a suit, a clipboard, and a velvet rope, and all of a sudden I was like, I wasn't a tough guy. I was still nice, but it was the power goes to people's heads. So you give people, and I think it's almost like there was actually an article like once cut out that was called "Revenge of the Nerd Syndrome." Like it was like all the nerdy guys in high school, like me, who couldn't get a date. All of a sudden, you have a position of power, and you have a little more say and control, but then the people who don't have good values, they abuse that power, right? They take advantage of that power.
Yes.
I had a boss who basically ran a casting couch out of his office. Like he would watch tapes, and then he would say to his secretary, oh, bring this woman in for a general audition, and she'd come out 2 hours later. So it was like, and everyone knew that was going on, and no one stopped it. So again, that's the culture of that industry, unfortunately. And that's, I think, Wall Street and Hollywood are two industries that they still need to change, but people don't get away with things as much now as they used to. Back then, it was like everyone knew and everyone gave everyone a pass on that.
Yes.
Yeah. So after Disney, I got a job at CBS, and I was interviewed by this woman. And I came home. I told my roommate, I said, I don't know if I met my new boss or my wife, because this woman is amazing. So I came home. She ended up hiring me, and the honeymoon lasted 2 weeks before she turned into the monster that she was. So I'm glad I did not marry her. So it was just, and she's the boss she was a year younger than me. She was actually a year older than me, a foot shorter than me, because I'm 6'4". She was around 5'4", but she would always throw her power around. So she would call me her boy. Like, I'd hear her on the phone saying, I'll have my boy bring you down a copy of the script talking about me. Like, here I am, I'm 29, she's 30, and she's saying, I'll have my boy bring you a copy of the script. And then one day, this is my famous story, and this is in my book, I'm sitting at my desk typing, and I feel her office door whips open behind me, and I feel something whip by my head, and she threw a box of pens at me, and she started screaming at me because she wanted the fine point paper made, and these were the medium point. And
How dare you?
instead of just saying, Todd, can you exchange these for the right ones? She started yelling at me in front of all my peers. So it was like all the executives had offices, all of us assistants were out in the main area. It was so humiliating. And so, plus it missed my head by literally like probably a few inches. But that's how she did things. And one time I confronted her. I actually kept a journal. I mentioned this in my book too. I kept an abuse journal, and I still have it. And I went in to talk to her once, and again, this was hard for me, again, as an introvert, confrontational. And I said, I feel like we're always having conflict. I said, I think if we communicated better, we would both be more productive. And she actually said to me, stop whining like a little bitch. This is an exact quote. Get back to your desk. And she said, when I had your job, I was treated like crap. I'll just say crap. And now it's your turn. And if you don't like it, I can replace you tomorrow. So instead of saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it, let's work it out, that was her response. So I did that job for about a year. She ended up getting fired, which was great. I was kind of promised her job, and then they brought someone in over me and asked me to train this person. And that's when I left, that was my last job in the TV industry before I transitioned to another career. So, but again, tons of stories where those come from, but those are some of you could get a sense of the path that I was on, or the roller coaster, as I say, of ups and downs and twists and turns with exhilarating highs and devastating lows.
Yes, but it sounds like you didn't stay in the lows. You actually learned something from each of these experiences, which took you forward. So take us back to the East Coast now, and what you did to transition from the media business.
Yeah. So I worked in the theme park business for a few years as a project manager, including one in China. And then I got laid off from this company. And I got laid off. I had just broken up with someone, and my father had just had open heart surgery. And my mother was like, I think the universe is saying it's time to come home. It was 10 years out in LA. My 3 closest friends out there, all from New York, all moved back to New York. So I was the last man standing. So I moved back to New York. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. But I ended up, remember, you used to look through Newsday and clip job ads and highlight and circle things. So there was a job ad at the American Management Association for a program manager. And I applied for one job. I didn't get it, but they offered me another job to revamp their mini MBA program. Even though I had no business background, they were like, you just need to you're a project manager, so if you just manage the project. But that's when I started reading all these management leadership books, saying there's got to, because my bosses there weren't so great either. At the time, it's a different place.
Ironically.
Yeah. Ironically, at the time, it was the worst managed place I had ever worked. So I always say that the toxicity of that environment. But like you pointed out, every experience, it was painful to go through at the time, but a learning and growth experience in retrospect, right? So you look back and say, I learned how not to treat people. I learned what it's like to, when people abuse their power. So that's when I really started diving into management leadership and reading all these books. And then I got let go from there. And then after a series of other jobs, I ended up taking a Dale Carnegie course. After 9/11, I was out of work and kind of down, and the whole city was in a depression. And again, at this point, I'd never spoken in public before, which is hard to believe because I talk really fast now, and like, you can't stop me now.
Yes, amazing.
I took a Dale Carnegie course in public speaking, and that changed everything. I had an amazing mentor, and they put me through their training program, and then I got hired as a trainer, a leadership trainer, and that launched my whole leadership training career, which is what I still do now. Like what, 20 years later.
That's amazing. Throughout your story, the way you talk about things is, yes, this job came to an end and got laid off. And again, you just pushed through. You're like, okay, I might have had a low, but you were not stopped. And I just think that's so powerful, especially during this time when so many people are being furloughed or laid off, to hear that it didn't stop you and your life doesn't end and you're not a bad person and you have so many qualities about you. And I just want to recognize that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's very hard to not personalize it when you're being abused and victimized. It's kind of like you feel like you're doing something to deserve it in a way. Like with my first boss, there was like, I needed a sanity check, like from some of my peers and saying, am I crazy or is she crazy? And they're like, no, she's crazy. So you're saying, it's like, I don't even know. My wife always hates these stories because she feels like, I was an abused child for all those years. It's like, why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you just quit? It's like, my dream was to work in television. I finally got my first job at a network. You keep thinking it's going to change, it's going to get better. And it's almost like being in an abusive relationship, right? You stay for the wrong reasons, or you stay for certain reasons, even though it's not what you want. But then at some point you have to say, luckily, sometimes I've been let go. I've been laid off a couple of times and fired once. And sometimes it's the best thing that could have happened. If I wasn't laid off, my job, just to fast forward a little bit, so I became a Dale Carnegie trainer. I met this guy, Jeff Schwartzman, who's a fellow trainer. Turned out we grew up 5 minutes away, but didn't know each other in Comac, Long Island. And we're both big Yankee fans and softball players. So we got to be great friends. He took a job at a company called LiquidNet, a Wall Street financial services technology company. And then a year later, he hired me as his head of leadership development. So it's just interesting how it's like Robert Frost, the poem, The Road Not Taken. You go down a path and you think you're going to come back. I'll go back to television someday, and I never did. And then one road leads to another, and then you find yourself in a certain place. So if it wasn't for LiquidNet, I wouldn't have developed all my leadership concepts that I wrote about in my book. I wouldn't have done a lot of other things that led to my teaching at NYU. NYU led to Columbia, and then all of that led to my getting a book deal. So my failures actually contributed to my success. I think you hit on the head, the resilience. Like, you can't just give up, right? It's like, even in the toughest times, even like right now in this pandemic, you have to find the positives, use the time to read. I've started writing a blog post called These Are One of These Days. Think about all the things that you have on your list where you say, one of these days I'm going to, I have a friend who said, I'm learning Italian. I always wanted to do that. I wanted to take piano lessons. I wanted to read more. This is the time that we're never going to have again. So even though it's hard and it's scary and we're just trying to stay socially distanced and safe, use your time to develop yourself and think about, what are the things that you're going to be glad you did when this is over, which it will be at some point.
Absolutely. That I couldn't have said it better. Those are it's beautiful what you just shared. So tell us more about the book and visual leadership. So what do you consider visual leadership?
Sure. Well, it starts with visual thinking. So visual leadership is a hybrid of visual thinking and leadership, right? So we all kind of know what leadership is. And I always define leadership, it's not about a title, it's about an action, it's about a behavior, right? So we are all leaders and managers of our own lives. So this is not for CEOs or VPs or whatever. This is for everyone. We need to step up to leadership in different ways at different times, even if it's with our own family, with your kids, with your whoever. You need to, and leadership is about, it's trust, it's having a vision, it's communication, it's all of those things. The vision part comes from, again, the combination of my background from my English literature major and from my years in the TV and the theme park business. It's, visual thinking is the concept is, how do you get people to see what you're saying, right? As a leader, you have a vision. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, right? He painted a picture with words of an idealized future state. He didn't have a PowerPoint presentation. He didn't have Excel spreadsheets, right? Or business plan. No. He basically painted a picture of the future using amazingly beautiful visual language, poetic language, alliteration, rhyme and rhythm. So it's about, I break visual thinking and my visual leadership concept down into 4 ways. It's about using visual imagery, including drawings, It's about using mental models and frameworks. It's about using metaphors and analogies, and it's about using storytelling and humor. Those are my 4 categories. And I think hopefully I've demonstrated a little bit of some of those just in our conversation. But that's what the book is all about, is how we could find our own stories. Every story has a beginning, middle, and end. Our lives have a beginning, middle, and end. Our careers have a beginning, right? So we're the character in our own story. And then there's always villains, victims, and heroes. Sometimes we're the villain, even if we don't want to be. Sometimes we're a victim, and sometimes we're the hero. And it's like we face obstacles. We're on a journey. We're trying to achieve some goal or quest, right? We have put together our band of, whether it's colleagues or our family, whoever, to support us, right? So if you think about leadership as a journey, the idea of visual leadership is visualizing your future, where you want to be, and then using these different techniques to help you get there.
And I just want to comment. So I was thinking back to what we just said a few minutes ago, and you shared your dreams, and you said that you wanted to be Batman and Superman. I think that's who you are being with this visual leadership. Okay. You are helping people to see that they have power. They have their journeys, and their journeys can make an impact on others through the stories that they tell and the humor that they impart in telling their stories. So so maybe the follow-up to the book is I am Batman.
I talk about that a little bit in the book, but that's very intuitive. Yeah, that's very insightful that you pointed out, because it's like Superman is about, what are his superpowers? It's strength. I don't have X-ray vision, unfortunately, but he has the super strength, and he has power and speed. Batman was almost more like a detective with smarts and his utility belt, right? So it's like when I'm helping people solve their problems, and my mission, my personal mission statement is making the world a better place, one leader at a time. And to me, everyone is a leader in one way or another, right? So like you just pointed out, I'm trying to help people find that leader within, and using both the strength and the power of my experience and knowledge with my questioning and detective work to help figure out what people need. So that's where I'm basically a consultant, trainer, and coach and professor, but I wear different hats depending on who the person is, what challenge they're facing, what the scenario is. So I try to be, this combination of, so when I take off my glasses, that's when I turn from Clark Kent into Superman.
There you go. A question for you about mentors and sponsors. So sponsors are those people who advocate for us when we're not in the room, and mentors we can be more casual with, so to speak. Today, do you still have mentors and sponsors along the way? Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, a few big ones. One is Mr. Patterson, my high school English teacher from 10th grade, who I just emailed the other day back and forth. We've kept in touch. Literally, I graduated in 1980, so this is 40 years next month, and we still stay in touch. I send him an email every April 23rd, which is Shakespeare's birthday, just to touch base with him. And I was happy to be able to say, send me your mailing address, because I'm mailing you my book. And he was like, so he was the one person who recognized in this shy, nerdy, back of the room kid that I had something special. And he wrote me a great recommendation when I graduated. I still have it. I don't carry it around in my wallet, but it's one of those things that you remember someone recognizing in you your potential that other people didn't see.
Yes.
And same thing at Dale Carnegie Training. Joe Armentano, who was the head of training at the time, he basically put me through the Dale Carnegie Training for free, because usually they charge for that, because he said, we need someone to do leadership, and he saw the potential in me. And he's one of the people I dedicate my book to, because without him, he really, again, at that time, I didn't really know what I was going to do career-wise, but if that hadn't happened, so that job led to my LiquidNet job, which led to NYU, and Columbia, and this book. So you just never know who you're going to meet who may change your life. And it's important, as you say, to recognize them and let them know it. Absolutely. Mr. Patterson once said to me, this is a quote from Yeats, that education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. So it's not just dumping information on kids or people, it's igniting a spark within them. It's kind of like the management saying, don't light a fire under people, light a fire within them. And that's what both of these mentors did for me. They found something, an unlit candle, and they lit the match, and I found the light. So just to mix those metaphors, but those were probably the two, outside of people in my family and my wife, those were probably the two people who had the greatest impact on my career paths.
And I think that's a good phrase, if you will, to leave with people about to find their spark within them, and to be surrounded by people who can help spur that spark and keep it lit. So in closing, we want people to find you and be able to find your book, Visual Leadership. So Todd, share with us where we can find you.
Sure. The best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn, and I am the only Todd Cherches, TODDCHERCHES. So just connect with me on LinkedIn. I respond to everyone. So just say, I heard you on the Susan Gans show, and I'm happy to respond. And in terms of my book, it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's called Visual Leadership. It's one word with one single L in the middle. So, but if you put in my name in Amazon, you'll find it as well. So those are the best ways to reach me and find the book.
Wonderful. So again, it's Todd Cherches in LinkedIn. It's Visual Leadership, all one word, on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And Todd, this has just been so much fun. I've enjoyed riding your roller coaster with you. And I know you're on the highs, and I just hope that the roller coaster keeps going up for you.
Thank you. You made it easy. I can't believe it flew by so fast. It was a great conversation. I probably talked too much, but once you got me started, that's the thing with an introvert. You like that extrovert spark in them, and then you can't shut it off.
It's all good. Thank you so much for being on the show. And to our audience, I hope you enjoyed and continue to watch. Until the next time.
Thanks.
You're welcome.